I am a licensed counselor, and at the same time, I am a patient. I've had Scleroderma now for systemic for 2.5 years. And as a counselor, also went through a lot of different things looking at how things happen and the emotional aspect of it. So I am here to try to impart a little bit, just a little bit of that wisdom or whatever you want to call it to you. So, okay. Now, hopefully you haven't had any doctors try this with you, but I mean, when you get that diagnosis, it really can be pretty overwhelming. Am I right? I just want to make sure I'm not the only one who dealt with that. Mine was to kick off the new year. Actually, it was a combination. I had a phone call I had some preliminary labs, and then I had a follow-up phone call from those preliminary labs, and it was New Year's Eve. And it was funny because that morning I was going for a run with the Runners Club, and I was pulling my vehicle into a parking space, and I was running late as I normally would, and I hit a patch of ice as I'm pulling into the parking lot, and my car slides a little bit into a parked car. And the first thing I notice as I'm sliding into this car is this new car sticker. You know, and I'm like, oh, this is good. I didn't even realize that the new car sticker was attached to a BMW, right? So this was New Year's Eve. Fortunately, it was somebody's car that I knew, and there wasn't a lot of damage, but I thought, I had a horrible year that year, and I thought, what a way to finish it. This is the worst. It can't possibly, get any worse. I go home, I get a phone call, and it was from the doctor's office, and the nurse says to me, so, yeah, we got your labs back, and your RA factor, rheumatoid arthritis factor, was negative. And I'm listening to her, and she says, that's good news. And I'm listening to her voice. As a counselor, I'm hearing her say, this is good news. And I'm hearing, this is not good news. Something is wrong. The very next thing is, can you come in for some more labs? I said, yes, when? She said, today. I said, today, it's New Year's Eve. You're talking today. Yes. Okay. So anyway, went in New Year's Eve afternoon, got my labs, and then got the phone call the very first working day of the new year at 7:30 a.m. So that was my kicking off the new year. So everybody's story is a little different. Anyway, the BMW turned out fine. That turned out to be what one thought was a big deal. That was nothing. And sometimes we have to keep things in perspective. Now, a diagnosis, and this is something that looking at really important. Now, we talk about, a lot of times you hear about death, and Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was noted for stages of grieving, but at the same time, it's not just death that we grieve, and the reality that you will grieve forever. You will not get over the loss of a loved one. You will learn to live with it. You will heal, and you will rebuild yourself around this loss you have suffered. You will be whole again, but you will never be the same, nor should you be the same, nor would you want to. And this is something that, to me, is important to understand, that you have a diagnosis, and it has changed you. Whether or not you have symptoms, that has changed you. You know, it's a part of your life now. And there is a grieving process. There is part of that. Now, statistics. How many people have been freaked out by statistics? Okay, yes. So, important to understand with statistics, because there are a lot out there. Obviously, they can be scary. A lot are based on old research. Important to know, based on old research. Sometimes they can be wildly inaccurate because they're based on old research. And they can lead you to assume the worst. And this is really important. No single statistic can account for who you are as a person. There is no statistic that can account for who you are and how you can defy the odds. And so that's one of the things. You can take a look at that and say, you know, none of these statistics are going to apply to me because I am going to be outside of the norm. I like looking at statistics, but that's part of my personality. I like to defy the odds. So for me, statistically, I have been dead for more than 2 years. Now, how I come up with that, there was a research that for men, it reduces the average lifespan by 26 years. And the average lifespan of male is 76.9 years. I'm 53, so I was diagnosed I was 51, actually 50 when I got diagnosed. So I've actually been dead. If you do the math, I should be dead for 2 years. And I ran a half marathon not that long ago, ran 10 miles the other day, not the other day, but a few weeks ago, finished second in my age group. So, not a death sentence. Do not get caught up in the statistics, unless you're like me who likes just thinking, oh yeah, I like to defy them. Don't let them define you. None of us will get out of here alive. Just so you know, 100% mortality rate for life. Again, a piece of reality there. You know, it's too easy to get worried about things and lose sight that, you know, none of us were promised anything in life. Being newly diagnosed, part of it is to educate yourself. Sorry, I'm a big Avengers fan, big Marvel fan, you know. And these are like three of like the smartest guys, and they educated themselves and learned different things. But educate yourself, learn a bit about what you have. Understand that the type that you have, the type of disease that you have, because there are so many different types. And for instance, you know, here you see you've got your localized, you've got systemic, but even for me, when I first was diagnosed, I didn't understand that the whole limited and diffuse, that's skin only. You know, just because you have the type, it depends. And also there is also sine or sign, depending, where skin isn't involved. That's where I'm at right now, but it can change. I know that. And you should also learn about your antibodies a little bit. Some of the things that you want to do as far as the education and the learning. Scleroderma Voice, the magazine, if you don't get that, you should. A lot of good stories, very focused, there's always information. research. So I highly, highly recommend getting on the mailing list to get that and read it, or at least look at the pictures, you know. Now, with the new diagnosis and medical, one of the things you need to do is you have to get organized. If you're a caregiver, this is great for you. You know, this is a job for you to do. And when I say get organized, look at organizing all the medical records that you have, because that's what doctors are going to look at, and those are the connections that are going to be so incredibly important. I thought about this, and I thought, oh yeah, I should do this, and I got to see a specialist, and I printed out all my records. I'm like, I need to get this in a binder, and it was probably about the 11th hour because my energy level wasn't there, and I'm putting it together that morning before the appointment. I was glad I did, because, okay, yeah, they start flipping through, looking at PFTs, looking at how they changed, echocardiograms, your labs. All that information is helpful because the history is helpful. Getting a baseline is helpful. Keep that stuff organized, critical. Other thing, we're in a different age now. So when something comes up, as far as a symptom, you can take pictures of it. If it's something weird, something new, and it's visible, do it. Just because sometimes, you know how things are. Oh yeah, I had this new symptom, or I had something and it went away, whatever it may be. If you've got a picture, then when you go and see your rheumatologist, hey, this is what it looked like. You've got it. Another thing that you should do, journal. Write down how you feel, what's going on. And you can journal as much or as little as you want. Some people will journal and they'll put down information as far as what they've eaten, and just see if there's any correlation between symptoms and so forth. But also there's a sense of just getting that information, that feeling out. How are you feeling? You can even ascribe numbers to how you're feeling. Okay, today is a bad day. On a scale from 1 to 10, and put that number down. One of the things that I've learned too is that the more you get used to symptoms, sometimes what you would say is a 4 becomes a 3. You know, just as you get used to it. Okay, it's not so bad. It's only a 3 today. But keep that in mind. All this stuff can be helpful, and particularly if you date that information. So if anything changes, it's going to be important. Scleroderma, what you see in me, what you see in anybody else, it is different in everyone. No two cases are the same. There's similarities, but no one has the same scleroderma. You can have the same type, you can have the same antibodies, but it doesn't mean you're going to have the same course of scleroderma. So that's, again, with the statistics, to not let that get into your head. You know, to not think, okay, this is what I've got, this is what this means. It doesn't. Another thing that you'll find, and some of you might have already found this out, that there are a lot of people out there, they mean well. Oh, this is going to help you. This is going to cure it. This is going to fix it. Yeah. There are many things like that out there. Yeah, this is one, snake oil liniment, cure rheumatism. Yeah, it's older, but there still are things out there. Now, when I say this, if you try something, a unique diet, whatever, usually touch base with your doctor, whatever, but If it's working for you, fine, go with it. If it's not, don't. But don't, whatever you do, try not to get caught up in, people will sell magic water you can spend thousands of dollars on this water or whatever, and they're out there. They are. I had somebody trying to convince me cryotherapy, that I should do that it's really good, it helps. And I'm like, I have Raynaud's. You want me to go into cold intentionally where it's going to have a negative impact? And they stop and they think, well, what's that? And I start explaining it. Oh, maybe not. Okay. But those are the things that you have to deal with. And just understand, a lot of times people, they mean well, but they don't get it. The other thing too is that you'll hear some people say, oh, they had this, they were cured. And that's where some of the things that there is no cure for scleroderma yet. And I put that yet in there because that's important. Just because there isn't one today doesn't mean there won't be one tomorrow or next year. One of the things my father, he passed away a few years ago, but he had a heart transplant in 1990. Now, they had told him to get a heart transplant in 1989 because he had a very damaged heart, and he said no. I mean, it was really a very new procedure at that point. And he held off for a year. That year made a big difference. Even though it was still early in the course, he ended up making it 23 years with his heart transplant. So things change, things get better as far as the treatment options. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is scleroderma is chronic. It's with you for the long haul. It's not something that, okay, yeah, you're going to be done with, you're going to be cured. It's part of you. And that's where that grieving process too, that is with you. And part of you is to own that. It is with you, and you're going to beat it. You will beat it. Other thing to keep in mind is symptoms can go into remission or diminish over time, and then they come back. And particularly when they come back, usually it's times of stress. And I'll touch on that a little bit. But yeah, it's not necessarily a straight line. It can go up and it can go down. And again, when symptoms diminish does not mean that you are cured. It's still there. It's chronic. So don't forget that. Don't get complacent. It's easy to. And one of the things you want to do is pay attention to changes in your body. Because sometimes that can be giving you new information. Now, that awareness that we're all learning as you're dealing with a new diagnosis, it takes time. That picture, which I personally love, it's a very skinny cat there. I took that picture because that was a moment in which I became aware that that cat had become mine. My family was in the process of, this cat showed up and they said, okay, well, we're going to give it a bath so it will be more adoptable and it will smell better because it smelled like smoke. It was in a house where people smoked all the time or whatever. And that was a moment where I was like, yes. And yeah, I've had that cat now for about a dozen years. So she's a lot fatter now. But that awareness, it's hard. It's not something that you will suddenly be aware of the changes in your body and you're going to know how you're going to deal with things. It takes time. Emotionally, it takes time. And as a counselor, I was both aware of what I had, and I would also say I was in denial the first 6 months that I had scleroderma, because also I was treated with a high dose of prednisone, which was shouldn't have done, but they didn't know what I had, and my symptoms diminished. And so I felt pretty good, but I knew I was still there. Even when I went to a rheumatologist, he's like, well, you seem like you're doing really good. Let's run your labs again. We're going to send them to Mayo to make sure. And they were exactly the same. And it's like, yeah, it's still there. It's still there. And there are some days I'm more aware of it than others. As far as getting information out there are a lot of places you can get information. You have internet chat rooms, different health sites. Thing to keep in mind here, in my opinion, do you think that really, truly healthy people are spending all their time in the chat rooms? Probably not. So that's one thing to keep that in mind. It can be a really good place to learn more about a specific symptom. You can get some ideas as far as medications, so forth. But it also can be overwhelming. And this is probably one of the most important things, because there's a fine line between educating yourself and getting overwhelmed. Has anybody dealt with that? I mean, it's something that, because you can dive in and you could start looking at all the statistics and all the possible symptoms and all the ways that things can go wrong. And that can be very, very overwhelming, exhausting, and may absolutely not happen. So you have to actually balance a little bit of education. I would do gut checks on myself. I would start sensing, okay, am I getting a little anxious, a little fatigued, trying to research, trying to look at stuff? You know, that's something that when I would have that, then I'd say, okay, it's time to unplug, you know, get offline. Inspire.com, that's probably one of the best ones out there for information. But again, you don't want to get overwhelmed. So keep following how you feel. Understand how you feel. And sometimes it's hard when you're wanting to learn everything, you want to know, to be prepared to do battle. Small chunks, small pieces. You can't eat the entire elephant unless you do it one piece at a time. So take your time with some of that. How many of you have felt concerns about cognitive issues? Okay. Well, yeah. What did you say? Sorry, no. Forgetting things, yes. Now, interestingly, I used to work with people with brain injury. So I'm also pretty analytical as far as with cognitive concerns. When I start seeing cognitive concerns in myself, and also I'd see this online where people be, oh, hey, I've got this going on, that going on, what's going on with my memory? Well, when you have multiple things happening in your head, you know, one, you've got your body is affected. You have a diagnosis that can be really scary looking, and that's in there. That's in your head, and you're thinking about that in the background most times. It might be. Once in a while you might completely push it out of your mind, but it's there. Well, and if you're thinking about that, there's other stuff you're not thinking about. One of the important things to understand, attention is the very first step in forming memories. So you're distracted, you're thinking about other things, that information's not going to come in. Now, example I would use, and you think, okay, attention and concentration. You have a husband and wife, and the husband's watching a football game. It's in the 2-minute warning, last 2 minutes of the game, and he's locked in. The wife comes in and says, Joe, hey, tomorrow night we're going to dinner at the Smiths. Oh, yeah, okay. Oh, go! Oh, right, and he's watching the game, and next night, she says, why aren't you getting ready? We're going to dinner. You didn't say anything. What do you mean we're going to dinner? But that's the attention and concentration. That attention, that first step is critical. And if you have internal distractors and you have pain and discomfort, your ability to focus is not going to be as good. If you have fatigue, it is not going to be as good. If you are trying to do more than one thing at once, it's going to be harder. Multitasking is a lot harder. I'm somebody who used to work 60 hours a week, easy, not a problem. I could do that, could juggle that. Used to run a outpatient brain injury program, was on city council, passed ordinances, all stuff. Not a problem. It was easy. Now, depends on the week. 40 hours sometimes can be a struggle. And I know the quality, not what I want it to be. Part of that is also you have to learn yourself, and that's part of that awareness. Like even this, doing this presentation, initially I was like, oh, hey, if you need lots of presentations, I love presenting, oh, that's fine. And then all of a sudden I'm thinking, before I hit send, wait, no. That's how I was able to do things. I hosted conferences, was MC, presented multiple times, not a problem. It's different. Depression and anxiety, two things too, do not help memory. If you're depressed, your energy level's lower, you're not going to focus as much on information getting in. If you're anxious, you have internal distractors that are taking up time. And obviously fatigue plays a huge role in that. One of the things to keep in mind, scleroderma rarely has a direct impact on cognitive functions. There's some information out there, but most of it is indirect, basically, that you're dealing with your fatigue, your depression, your anxiety. So, Raynaud's, some thoughts, very important. When possible, you want to avoid the cold. That sounds simple, right? How many of you live in northern states? Okay. Sometimes it's easier said than done. I live in the beautiful Black Hills of South Dakota. Love it out there. And a little different now. I don't love it quite as much. So now, one of the things to talk about, that the cold, preparing for the cold. It's not, oh yeah, you grab your coat and gloves. It's a little more than that. You want to know how how it's going to be. And some of it's a learning experience. So if you're like where I live, the weather can change quickly. So you want to keep spare gloves, hand warmers, toe warmers available in your car, because weather changes, you don't want to let that go. Because basically when that's being affected, that's closing up those capillaries, and you want to keep them open and keep yourself warm. So have those available. Sometimes you might, if you have problems reaching into the fridge, keep gloves near the fridge. One of the things I love to do, I eat ice cream. And depending on the day, either I'm using multiple towels or I've got gloves on, because I'll hold the bowl while I'm eating it. But as long as I can still eat my ice cream, I'm okay. I have to keep eating it earlier and earlier in the day, but that's okay. This is one that was hard for me to learn. You know, just running out to your car for a second, which for whatever reason, I'd always end up, oh yeah, just run out to my car, just go out, and I didn't keep my car in a garage. So, well, I'd start realizing, oh, wait a second, this is weird. My hands are cold. All I did was run out for a moment. So you have to start thinking a little bit. Put the gloves on. It's easier to do that, or put a jacket on and keep your core warm. It's easier to do that than deal with the attack. And this is probably, now as a runner, because I like running outside, the idea of this is probably going to be too warm is better than this should be warm enough. Because there are many, many times where I'd start thinking, oh, this is going to be warm enough. This should be fine. No, and it wouldn't be. So, and I've got actually, I almost thought about throwing it in there, but I have a picture of myself with running group where, yeah, it was like 4 degrees and -30 with wind chill. That's what I would do beforehand. Now, even bundled up, if it's 30 degrees, that's my cutoff right now, but it also depends on the type of weather. And that's considering gloves and everything else. And there are some days that 50, 60 degrees is tough. So, things that you want to avoid: smoking. That's something, if you're a smoker, you want to stop. Drinking alcohol after the conference, you can stop that. But yeah, certain things, because also that'll affect your reflux. Cold weather, sometimes you can't avoid it. Eating late at night, that's one that, sometimes you have to make changes. Certain types of food, you have to make adjustments. Rabid animals, you always want to avoid rabid animals. And personally, I think Walmart is one of those things, you just throw that in there, you want to avoid that as well. So, and there again, not a totally complete list. There are many other things that if you have exes or whatever, you might want to avoid them as well. But some things to keep in mind: stress. Now, stress affects the entire body. And there are different types of stress. So it's important to understand that, there's acute stress where all at once you get something. You get pulled over by a police officer. That's an acute stressor. You get an eviction notice or whatever it may be. That's an acute stressor. It can be pretty severe, but it's an acute stressor. And you also have more chronic stressors that are long-term, drawn out. So now stress is bad for you. That's one of the things that point out. Stress is bad. You don't want to have stress. However, you also, if you have scleroderma, you have a chronic disease that automatically gives you stress. So you have to deal with that stress, and you have to learn to deal with it. And some of the things that, because too much stress is bad for you. That's a target that I had that, we had little Santa, and he was doing okay at that point. He had been missed a few times, but you want to avoid stress. And part of it, become aware of how you feel. Listen to your body. And I know I've said this before, I'm going to say it again. You have to listen to your body and how you feel. Because part of that, as you have changes, you can make adjustments. Big thing too, do not panic. Again, you have a change in your body, you don't want to start panicking. If you're having a Raynaud's attack, anybody know what happens if you start panicking and stressing about it? You make it worse. That's one of the things, because stress affects the body. I'm pretty good at controlling my stress as far as anxiety and so forth. And a couple times where I couldn't, driving in a snowstorm, where I start thinking, I'm like going down this steep hill, and I probably should have stopped for gas sooner, but I didn't think the storm was coming, and it hit, and I'm like, if I go off the road, I'm gonna run out of gas, and I'm gonna get really cold, and meanwhile it was slippery, and I've got the heat cranked up in my car, and my fingers are all white. Fortunately for me, it was still early on, they're just white mostly. And I realized, well, I'm not helping my situation because I'm stressed about that. So you have to work on relaxation, have to work on keeping that stress level down. The things you can control, do control, because stress will make it worse. Big thing is to try to sense your body objectively. Again, like, oh, this is kind of weird, look at this. Instead of, oh, this is scary, I don't know. And it takes time. It's not an overnight process. And that's what I'm going to talk a little bit about mindfulness, because that's something where you're making changes and you're being aware. Mindfulness, very important. A lot of people hear it. It's a big buzzword. And here we go. This is mindfulness. No, I'm kind of kidding there. May I be excused? My brain is full. Mindfulness. Okay, sorry. It was bad, But here, and you've got this in your handout, you've got more the clinical definition of mindfulness, but really focusing on one's awareness in the present moment while calmly acknowledging and accepting your feelings, thoughts, and bodily sensations. And that's what you almost need to do as things are happening, and not let yourself get stressed. Don't get overwhelmed. So some of the key thoughts on mindfulness: remain calm, look at situations objectively, don't get wrapped up in them, consider them as something happening, and review each different sensation separately, because there can be several sensations going on at once. Relaxation techniques, things that you want to try and experience. Meditation is something that a lot of people will do. Visualization, being able to visualize something and have that be someplace calm where you can go to in your mind. Progressive muscle relaxation, where you tighten and release muscles, working up your body. Yoga, and there are yoga classes here that you can take. And I have to say, yoga is one of the things that I have on my list of things that I should be doing. I run, I do push-ups, but I should be doing yoga, but I haven't quite done that yet. And at the same time, I know it makes sense. Deep breathing. This is my favorite relaxation technique. And part of the reason it's my favorite is that if you do deep breathing properly, you can do it anywhere. You can do it in a job interview. You can do it in your car, anywhere. Whereas visualization, if you're driving and you're closing your eyes and you're visualizing, not a good thing. Don't do that. Don't do that, So again, one of the things it does, it gets more oxygen into your system. It stimulates the autonomic nervous system, so it lowers your blood pressure. Good things that will help you. So, and this is from COPD Foundation as far as how you go about doing the deep breathing, and that should be in your handouts. Slow inhale, a couple seconds, exhale, and do it repeatedly. Something that you want to get into the habit of doing, so that when that officer pulls you over for speeding because you're racing out of the Walmart parking lot trying to avoid the rabid animals, you take the deep breaths. And that's part of it, just to try to get yourself calmed down. Exercise. I'm a big fan of exercise. And I will tell you one of the things, when I came to very first conference I came to, there's Scleroderma, I was newly diagnosed within my first year, felt totally overwhelmed. I'm looking around and I'm like, wow, okay, I'm doing well. And I know not everybody is. And it really freaked me out. And I had a very interesting situation. I was in an elevator, and a woman got in, and I looked at patient or presenter, and she says, patient, how long? She said, well, I said, type systemic. How long? Over 20 years. And I'm like, what are you doing? Lands at the next floor, doors open, she says, just keep moving, and she drifted off. And I never saw her again. I don't know whether or not she was real or she was an angel just placed there. But that keeping moving is probably one of the biggest things you can do. And even if you can't do what you used to do to the same extent, and you have to adjust, and part of that, there's a grieving process to that. But to keep on moving as much as you can, it will help. And some of the reasons, one of the things, exercise helps reduce stress. It removes stress hormones from the body. So keep that in mind. That's one of the things. When you have cortisol in your body, one of the few things that gets rid of it faster is exercise. This is one I'm also a big fan of as far as activity tracking. Now, yes, I'm able to run a lot, but it doesn't have to be that. Whatever your goal is, if you look at saying, okay, I'm going to try to, if you can do 2,000 steps a day, that's your goal. You set that as your goal and you try to improve on that. And you keep trying to improve a little bit. Don't overdo it, but gradually try and improve. And I would say if you get an activity tracker, set the move alert on it. I do that. And I find, because now I have muscle involvement, that the longer I sit, if my alarm goes off telling me to move and I say, I'm busy, I'm ignoring that, and I keep working. When I get up, I'm stiff. And it helps, even if you're just walking across the room for a moment or so. But I like how the activity trackers work, because usually you have to keep moving for a little while before they tell you, okay, you can sit now. So consider that. Another thing, don't take life too seriously. Can you tell that my cat was kind of glaring just a little bit there? She didn't like the hat. But there are so many things in life, but the other thing is you're here, you're alive. I don't know, but for me, some of the things that I look at, again, none of us know how long we have. Before you had a diagnosis, you didn't know how long you had. There are two ways of taking it. You can say, hey, I got another opportunity. I know I've got something, and this can change how my life is in the future. Enjoy things now in the moment. To be thinking, okay, I want to enjoy my life. I want to do things. For me, I notice things differently. You know, if it rains, I notice the smell of the rain more. And part of it is just thinking, how do you enjoy life more? What do you do? You know, we only have one shot at life. My father, one of the things that, you know, I mentioned is heart transplant. And when he was getting his transplant, he just kept saying, he's like, all I want is 3 good years. That was it. And that would have been good in 1990. But that's what he's like, all I want is 3 good years. And he ended up with 23 years, and about 20 of them were really good. Not without complications or that, but realizing you don't know how much time you have. And none of us do, but most times people go through life without any knowledge whatsoever. And then, you know, a plane crash or whatever, they get hit by a car. Oh, that's so tragic. What is more tragic is that if you go through life and you don't live life and you don't enjoy life, and yet you have the ability to enjoy life because you get caught up in everything else. And that includes getting too caught up in scleroderma. You know, you've got this, but you need to enjoy life. And one of the things, the more you probably talk to people, you realize, wow, there's some really not healthy people who are really healthy. Physically, they're not healthy, but emotionally and mentally, they're very healthy and have a different outlook on life. And the people who take life and try to suck the marrow out of life as far as enjoying it, those are the ones that do well. For years, when my father would come out and visit, I couldn't keep up with him. You know, his heart was 2 days younger than mine, even though his body was a lot older. But he would just be like, okay, let's go here, let's go here, let's do this. As long as he could, he would. But the attitude, being positive, and one of the things, as I said, there wasn't a clear path of there aren't any problems. He had about a month, maybe 2-month stretch where he was diagnosed with prostate cancer, Paget's disease, and Parkinson's in a 2-month period. And when I talked to him, I'm like, Dad, you know, he's like, well, I'm just going through the P's in the medical dictionary. That's it. And attitude, so much. And Andrew Botieri, you know, that's one of the things he talks about, attitude. If you believe you can beat a disease, you will. In brain injury, I would look at people and I'd say, okay, I do counseling groups sometimes, and I'd put a scale 0 to 100, and I'd say, okay, what's the worst that you were at? Put it on the scale, and it might be the worst shape they were in might have been at 10 or 20. Okay, what's the best that your doctor said you could do? Well, most said they wasn't going to live. They figured I wouldn't make it. So, or just a little bit beyond that, maybe 25. Where are you now? They'd be much further. I found that most people who did well were a little defiant and said, I'm going to prove that doc wrong. I'm going to show them. So yeah, don't take life too seriously. Enjoy the little things. I mean, boxes, come on. I'm a big cat fan, so, and sometimes you need therapy, yeah, Ben and Jerry's. So some of the things to keep in mind that our challenges, they build us up. Khalil Gibran said, the deeper that sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain. That's something that I believe. And can you imagine your joy when a cure is found? And I believe we will see that. I truly believe we will see that. Treatments continue getting better. They're moving in the right direction. So another thing that I think is very important too is faith. It's one of my big things. I believe in God. I know not everybody does, but that is something that if you have a belief in something greater, we will eventually have perfect bodies. I know my best days. Yeah, I'm still running and everything, but I know my best days are behind me. They're not ahead of me until after this life. Then all bets are off. So keep that, and sometimes you have to keep also an eternal perspective in mind. And Nietzsche, he who has a why to live for can bear almost any how. And that's something, finding meaning in what you do with your life, and whether or not it's even just enlightening people about scleroderma, telling them about the disease, letting more people know about it. Because I look at it and I think, okay, I've got a really rare form of a rare disease, and I'm a guy in a predominantly women's disease. I think the odds of that statistically are outrageous. Why couldn't I have hit the lottery instead? I mean, you'd think, but you get the cards you're dealt with. You live with them. You move on. You try to do what you can with life. And sometimes that how and why, helping other people. And it might, but there again, you need to take time yet to adjust. Diagnosis is a big thing to swallow. Take your time. Give yourself some patience. If you can't do something, one day, another day you might be able to. So, my thing, I've got this on my watch. I've got it made bracelet for myself with it, but this is what I look at. Boil it down. Relax, pray, and keep moving. That moving is important. The relaxing is important. And to me, you have to be able to, if you're going to pray, you want to relax before you pray, just because you'll pray a little more clear. And at the same time, you can get angry if you've got faith, you can get angry at God. He's big enough to take it. So, and there are times where, yeah, you might feel that, but you know, everything happens. I believe everything happens for a reason. Sometimes we don't know why when it happens, and it might be years down the road that we see it. You know, but, and even on the way here, flying here, I was talking to somebody on the plane and told them what I had. And I thought, well, maybe they're going to Philly for the conference. They weren't. But they knew somebody who had scleroderma. They had a relative. And like, scleroderma? Wait, I know what that is. Yeah. So keep that in mind. Be aware. Enjoy life. Remember, it's not a death sentence. You will do well, and you all will beat it. And and the more you go around and talk to people, there are a lot of people who have been doing it for years and years and years. And the advantage that we have in this room is that medicine is a lot better now, and treatment options are a lot better now than they were 3 years ago. I mean, stem cell treatment, that was like nothing. They're still learning about that. So keep yourself going, keep moving, stay active. It slows everything down. The more you relax, the more you keep moving, the more it slows your progression. So, and be aware of changes, document, and make sure you get to a scleroderma specialist at some point. So, and that's something that can be a little harder just based on geography, but still try to do that.